Hi everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Sasha Pilch. I'm the co-founder of NYC FinTech Women. And for those of you who haven't been to one of our events before, our mission is to connect, empower, and sponsor women in order for them to advance their careers. Traditionally, we held physical events at the offices of top New York fintech companies such as Stash, Plaid, Adyen, as well as traditional enterprises like Deutsche Bank, Silicon Valley Bank, and Google. This is actually the first event that we are hosting virtually, and I'm very excited about the topic of today, especially because there's so much talk globally about how there needs to be more women on boards, yet there aren't very many resources out there to help women figure out how to get on the boards. So I'm very excited that we have an expert in this topic as our guest speaker today. Betsy Atkins is an incredible woman. She is a 3-time CEO, VC. She is on a number of boards herself, 12 in total, and she has also written a book about how to be board ready. So I'm going to hand over to Laura to moderate and Betsy to share her wisdom.
Hello.
Hello.
Thanks, Sasha. Thank you everyone so much for joining. Thank you, Betsy, for being with us. We're so excited to have you today. We have so many questions that we could ask you. I have a few here that I'll be asking you, and then after my questions, we're going to open it up to audience questions. So for everyone listening, feel free to use the chat feature throughout the interview, and then we'll pick a few of your questions to ask Betsy at the end. So let's dive in. Betsy, the first question I have for you is about personal branding. So a lot of our audience members want to know, how can they package their skills, their credentials, to gain that next level leadership position, be it a business unit within their company, a C-suite role, or eventually a board seat?
I think you have to distill down the 2 or 3 things that you're going to stand for in your personal brand. Will you be known as a great operator, somebody who follows up, follows through, always executes? Are you a creative innovator? Are you a financial expert? So figure out what it is that's making you special and unique, and have 3 properties that you're enforcing in your branding, in what you say, what you do, how you present yourself to your peers, your managers, the senior leadership, and the external outside. Consciously think about what those attributes are and distill it down to your brand promise.
I love that. So make it clear and concise and tell the person why you bring value.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's good.
So I think one of the reasons a lot of us are here, right? How do you get on a board? So, how do you generate leads? What are the different pathways to get on a board? How do you do it?
So there are a lot of ways, and I think it makes sense to parallel process and go for them all. So the obvious things that everyone has heard of course, are executive search firms, using your professional network, your peers, your boss's boss, colleagues around you. But then there are the other things that are less obvious. For example, venture capital firms populate their portfolio companies with for-profit corporate board members. Private equity does. And then there are the sort of ecosystem of service providers around the boardroom, which would be the investment bankers, the outside law firms, and the big 4 accounting firms who service boards. So I think looking at those channels, and that's a lot of different channels, and then there are the lists out there that help women on boards, Him for Her, Athena. There's all different kinds of organizations that are promoting diversity and inclusion in the boardroom. So it's a lot. And I think if you want to do it, you have to look at it like a business development undertaking. You have to sort of say, I'm going to give it 10% of my time. I'm going to be prescriptive. I'm going to work through these different channels, search firms, private equity, venture, law firms, and you will get there like anything else that you've done. I mean, your audience are people who make it happen, or they wouldn't be curious and here listening and learning how to, conquer their next mountain.
Totally. And what's interesting about that, like when you have done that in your past, do you just outright ask, for it and just say like, hey, look, I'm looking to get on a board. This is the value I can bring, and you treat it like that? Or does it happen a little more organically?
I don't think it's the best thing to do. If you're cultivating a network and you want people to help you, believe it's like a bank account. You can't take money out till you put money in. Mm-hmm. And so what you're putting in is reputational trust and confidence. So I think the first things you want to do is pay it forward and help the person you're going to ask a favor for. So, you'd want to prove you were competent, you followed up, you followed through, would be proud to introduce you. Find a way to add some value to them. If you're a venture capital or a private equity principal, if one of the great people in this audience, offered to help portfolio companies, maybe be an informal advisor, help facilitate an introduction, mentor an executive in one of these companies, then I would be a lot more motivated to want to, first of all, I'd see you were great and you added value and you followed through. And then I'd want to help you because you've helped me. Somebody who just asks for something where you don't have a relationship, that's not the greatest way, in my opinion.
Makes complete sense. And then that person feels comfortable, giving you that position because they see what you're made of. They see what you can do. You've already proven yourself.
Right. And you've probably differentiated yourself because 9 out of 10 people don't extend themselves. They don't do what they say. They don't necessarily add value. And, you have to think of it as, are you relationship building or are you doing a transaction? If I'm asking you for something, I want to transact with you. Give me this, please. Why? If I'm investing in building a relationship with you, I'm a lot more oriented and excited about helping your career.
Makes complete sense. Okay, so let's say we do all that, we did it, we got on a board. Now what? So what makes for an effective board member? How do you actually bring value to the board that you're on?
So first thing you need to do is you have to put yourself in the mind of the CEO. You're there, in my opinion, to board oversight, but to be an asset and to be an accelerant for the business. So you want to be a thought partner. So enter the boardroom having done your own homework on the competitors, what are the macro trends that affect the industry, what is the industry research. So you could look at Gartner, IDC, Forrester to see industry research. You'd look at macro trends from Accenture, McKinsey, Boston Consulting Group, whether it's, a digital transformation, future of retail, future of industrial automation, whatever it is, the industry that your company's in. So learn more about the industry, learn about the macro trends, learn a little bit about the competitors, maybe listen to the earnings call if it's a public company of your CEO and the competitors. All of a sudden, you're a thought partner and you're bringing a useful frame of reference because you're there to be really helping the business grow. And so if you've done your homework, I think you bring an informed frame of reference. I think reaching out to the other directors to learn their institutional memory. They've been there longer than you. And then you build rapport because they want to help you because you've asked them first for their view of what are the opportunities, what's the challenges. They sort of take you under their wing a little bit when you reach out and ask for their learnings and guidance. So I think those are some of the ways that, you can set yourself up to add value when you go into the boardroom.
It makes total sense. And, a follow-up question to that is, I think in the PowerPoint that we showed when we were starting, we showed 12 boards that you're on, but that's just a sample, right? You've actually been on, how many boards is it?
So I've served on 34 different public corporate boards, and I've been through 13 IPOs. Currently, I'm serving on the board of Wynn Resorts and Casinos, the New York City Real Estate Investment Trust, SL Green, that's building right on Grand Central, One Vanderbilt, and Volvo Car Company. And then I serve on some private boards. But the list of public ones is pretty extensive, and a lot of them are big brand names you've heard of, and maybe a third of them are tech companies that if that wasn't your industry, they might not be familiar.
So I asked because that's an incredible amount of boards to be on, right? And your advice in that question is like, kind of become an industry expert, really know your stuff, and be able to add value that way. How have you done that with such a diversified, portfolio of companies that you have served on a board for?
Laura, it's such a good question because it goes back to the beginning of why are you valuable, right? So what's the perspective you are bringing? What was your brand? What was your personal brand?
Yeah.
Are you a financial expert? Are you a marketing and branding person? Are you a go-to-market person? Are you a tech person? I'm a tech person. So I think the unifying thread across the fabric of these different industries is digital transformation. I think I bring a tech perspective, and I think I go-to-market perspective and a marketing and branding perspective, and an entrepreneurial. So I'd say those were my sort of three attributes. And I think being entrepreneurial, thinking about tech and how you go to market, that applies to every industry. And if we look at the audience, we have people, so think of your functional domain background. That's part of your expertise. You're a finance person, a manufacturing, a supply chain. That applies to every industry. You're a problem solver or reliable, make it happen execution person, or you wouldn't be self-improving like this. If there's another industry background that is your home industry, and you can talk about the learnings that apply. So if you're an early stage entrepreneur, that entrepreneurial journey, the 0 to 20 million, the 0 to the first 50 million, that applies to all industries. If you're a big company person and how you do cost takeout and turnaround and drive efficiency, that applies to every industry. So when you look at yourself, you have so many talents in your current portfolio. It's just messaging it and figuring out how to sort of sloganize yourself.
That's so true. That's such a good way to put it. I was here thinking like, I need to become an expert on so many different industries, but you're right. Just think about your core values and how you can apply that to pretty much everything.
Yes.
Great advice. So this next question I have for you is my favorite, and I'm hoping for some good intel here. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you see first-time board members make? What should we not do?
Yes. Okay. So enthusiasm to show we're alert and we're in it to win and contribute. And by the way, I did this, so I know it. You over communicate. You participate. I think you have to think of it, right? A board typically has 10 people in the average board. And, boards are mostly made up of presentations by management with a little bit of time for discussion and dialogue, questions, and all of that. So you should think of yourself like at a baseball game. How many times do you get at bat when you play baseball? 9 innings, you get 3 at bats. That's it. So better to under communicate and let them think that you're an active listener, you're really genuinely interested, make notes, be engaged, have your body language be, that you're attentive. But don't ask a lot of questions. Don't say, oh yeah, good idea. Oh, great comments, so-and-so. No, you don't need to say that stuff. And I would do, you remember we were talking about the homework and the preparing, and they give you a board package to read. Read it and have 1 or 2 questions that you've thought about how, you might add value to the business or you'd like to understand the business. It doesn't have to be showing off that you're smart. It has to be that you're concerned about how the business, is going to grow and thrive. Because if you're the thought partner to the CEO, which should be the ideal mindset, then you're thinking about it from the CEO's lens of, what is our opportunity in this geography? Would we be better to acquire a company or grow organically? How do we think about the trade-offs of international expansion versus doubling down in the North American market? Those kind of things demonstrate that you're thinking about the future of the business much as the CEO is. And those are the kinds of curious questions that always reflect well on you, because it demonstrates your care about the business thriving.
I love that. So be eager, but don't show too much eagerness.
Yes.
Awesome. So one thing that I loved reading about in your book, Betsy, was in regards to building a professional network that reflects the job you want versus the job you already have. So obviously here at NYC FinTech Women, like, we are all about building a network. That's pretty much one of our main purposes as an organization. And I was hoping that you could tell us a little bit more about, why you need the right network to get your foot in the boardroom door. We kind of touched upon that, in the first question. But more importantly, like, as to why you need the network, how do you get it? So how does someone, maybe at a director level or a VP level, how do you start getting that professional network that reflects that next level job that you hope to attain?
So I think the way you do that is, when you look around your organization where you work, you'll see, and you already know this intuitively, that there's probably 1 in 10 people who execute, follow through, and make things happen.
Yeah.
And you'll also notice there's 1 in 10 people who have a generous heart and a giving spirit, who like to help. So the first thing I'd look at is, who are those people who have those properties? Because that adage, you want something done, give it to the person who's the busiest, because they go make a ton of things happen. So I'd look horizontally and up at the people you admire in your organization, who have those attributes, who make things happen, get things done, and who are generous hearted. And I would cultivate and build a relationship, not a transaction, with them. I would go to them and ask, could I have your advice and counsel? I was thinking about this and that as, areas for my personal development. And I see that, you're somebody I admire. And you want to do it where it's not too big an ask, and where you're going to follow up and demonstrate that you listen. Is there a book that you would recommend I would read? Are there articles? Are there blogs you follow? Could you give me a few tips? I'd like to have a coffee with you. Everyone will have a coffee with you if you've asked for a really small ask. How did you get here? What worked for you? How can I learn from you? And also, do something nice. Follow up if they've done that. Bring them a fresh muffin, send them a small vase of flowers, because people don't reciprocate. And it's so strange that they don't understand relationships have to be symmetrical.
Yeah.
If I give to you and I'm giving you my time, it would be nice if you did a little acknowledgement. And whatever that small thing is, they're interested in something, something in their family, something in their, personal interest, bring them something that relates to that, or an article, or, make sure that you're consciously not just asking. And then I do think as you go through that relationship building, you build your network and use that lens of people who are generous spirited, because otherwise you're just going to get shut down by someone who's not a generous human. Most are not going to go out of their way. And most don't get things done. So I use that lens when I think about, the process of forward investing and building a network, so that then later, hopefully you can get some, help and guidance.
And then, and something you said, which is, asking, is there a book I could read? Is there a blog, an article, or something like that? Something that I've always found useful in the past is, like, is there someone else that knows a lot about what I'm asking that you could introduce me to? I found that as a good way to build the network, outwards.
Yes.
My boss may know someone in her network that knows about what I'm asking for, and then all of a sudden that person becomes part of my network, which just lets it grow. And people always like making introductions. Cool. I have so many more questions I could ask you, but I want to open it up to our audience to give at least 10, 15 minutes or so for audience questions. So I think Elsie is here to ask a few of them.
Perfect. So we're going to go through a couple questions. First up is Yelena from Brex.
Betsy, thank you so much for sharing your insights. This is a really interesting conversation. My question is around nonprofit boards. I heard that that's a great way to get board experience, especially if you're earlier on in your career. Do you have any experience being on a nonprofit board, and how would you approach that conversation, and what kind of skills would you highlight there?
I think there's value in being on a nonprofit board, but I think what you want to do is be able to measure what you're doing. So if you're just writing a check and fundraising, that may not be something that a corporate board would value as much. So think about how the skill that you're going to develop in the nonprofit, what is it that you're going to do that you can identify where you accomplish something and added value. So I think you may want to be choiceful, and engaging in the nonprofit is a good way to the corporate boardroom, but just make sure it's not such a gigantic organization that you can't have an influence or an impact.
Thank you so much.
Perfect. And our next question is from Caitlin.
Hi, yes. This is Caitlin. Just sort of following up on a similar type of question for those that are early in their careers. What is the best way to start thinking about really setting yourself on that path for being on a board in the future? Because it may vary according to where you are in your career path, how you're outreaching to people, and really what are the right questions to ask.
So I think that there's a lot of great networks out there that we didn't mention. And I mentioned a bunch of them in my book, but there are organizations like Him for Her, Athena Alliance, the Advisory Cloud. There is a bunch of organizations that the 30% Coalition, that their whole mission is to help women get on boards. So I think if you looked at those organizations and put your name on and registered and went to some of the events. And then there is an organization called the National Association of Corporate Directors, and they have meetings, and there's websites and conferences that explain what the board is, what's the duty of the board, what the 3 standing committees are. So there's a lot of kind of self-education and information out there that you can start to absorb, because like every industry, it's got its own little glossary of terms and code words, and you need to be able to, have a little confidence that what the audit committee is and the compensation committee and what they each do and things of that nature. So there's a way to familiarize yourself through board governance information out there, things to read, and then some of these organizations that promote getting women on board as well.
Perfect. And our next question is from Vijay.
Thank you, Laura and Elsie, for moderating the event. Thank you so much. Congratulations, Betsy. It's amazing track record. This is fantastic. The question I have is, how do you handle different priorities and be a effective thought leader, right? For, founders and CEOs and the C-level folks that you work with.
It's a very interesting point you raise. I do a lot of mentoring on the boards I work with. And first you have to be invited in by the CEO. So if as a board member, I start calling the CFO and the head of marketing and the director of sales, everybody freaks out. You're going around me. What are you doing? You're talking to my subordinates. Are you giving them assignments? I don't know about it. So you have to build your trust first from the top down, and you have to offer. And I love doing that mentoring. I learn so much more about the company and the organization, the culture. And as a director on a private or a public corporate board, part of what I want to do is be able to assess the culture and the talent pool. So how do I do that? So if I go to my Volvo board meeting, I typically go a day early, and I'll have 7 or 8 on-site meetings with different organizations, and then I'll do a lunch and learn on the factory floor, and they'll let me put the hard hat on. They never let me do any of the assembly of the cars, which I think I wouldn't screw it up, but they don't believe me. You have to earn the ability and go through a kind of a correct protocol to engaging with different levels. Working with early stage entrepreneurs is a different level of engagement and informality than public companies. And it all is based on extending yourself to help the leaders in the company. And then you get invited in, you get to, understand the different priorities. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much.
A couple questions were around how do you find female board members? It's a hard topic near and dear to NYC FinTech women.
So now we're very fortunate. We're all of us on this call. We're living in the moment where they're trying to catch up and bring more boardroom gender diversity. And so there are rules that have come out of California and New York mandating a certain number of women. We're aiming, in Europe, it's 40%. In the US, we're, probably at 27, 25% of all boards have women on them. 20% of the seats are female, so almost a third. So we're catching up, and there is a pull. There's a market demand, a market pull for women. So it is the right moment to be looking for boards. And if you're earlier in your career, I think looking at private corporate boards and not-for-profit boards, that's the best way in. So the earlier you are in your career, the smaller the corporate board that might be eager for you. So an early stage investor that does A round or B round or seed investing or an incubator or an accelerator, those kinds of boards are easier to get. They want the engagement and they want the help. And, for you need the credential. You need to be able to prove you've been on a board before to get the next board gig. So that would be some of the ways I think about it, going for the earlier stage companies if you're earlier stage in your career.
There's a question here in the chat that I really want to have you answer, Betsy, because I find it really interesting. So Jill asks, I have 20 years of finance and technology experience, but have been told that I am not a decision maker. How can I springboard from being a task worker to a decision maker in order to be considered as a potential board member?
I think when you're in an individual contributor role, the way to try and be more of a decision maker is to be a convener. Be the person who volunteers for a cross organizational project or a cross organizational team, and be the person who captures all the inputs from others, does the summary, does the follow-up. I'm a compulsive lunatic note taker, and I'm a compulsive lunatic follow-up machine. So I find it naturally flows to me because I make all the notes of what was discussed in the organization, in the meeting, the cross group. I do a summary, I share it with everybody. I summarize the tasks and the follow-ups. I summarize, you said this, Laura, you were gonna do that. Elsie, you said that. Sasha, you said this. And then it just naturally falls to you as the convener and the capturer of the information. And you just sort of morph yourself into it. That might be a way to think about it.
Christine asked, when starting out on boards, especially with startups, is board insurance critical? And do you decline if there's no board insurance?
Oh boy, I love that question. So first of all, it is standard on a private board to have director and officer insurance. And it's, in my opinion, I don't do a board without it. On a public board, so for example, 35% of all corporate boards in America at any one time are being sued. So normally there's like 18 to 20 lawsuits against me. I don't even know what they are because the company's general counsel takes care of it. I'm on the board of Volvo. There was some car accident. Somebody in Volvo sues the board that my tire blew out. I don't know about that. It gets handled. So you do need director and officer insurance. You're pretty safe from a bad event, except if the company goes insolvent, bankrupt. I was on the board of Health South. and we went into the zone of insolvency and I was the chairman. In that case, the board's insurance gets emptied out. There is no insurance shield, and there is no indemnification shield because the company, when they're in the zone of insolvency or they're going to go bankrupt, you owe the duty of loyalty to the creditors. So you could actually lose your house, and that would be, I don't want to end my days working in Walmart as a greeter. So you do need the D&O insurance on a public board. It is standard on almost all boards where there is an investor. And it is, so any venture capital backed or private equity board will have D&O insurance, as will all public boards.
So interesting. I actually didn't even know that was a thing, to be honest. Cool. There's so many other questions, but I think we'll end it there for now. Betsy, thank you so much. This was really great, and going off of all the chats, people were really engaged with this one, so thank you. And as far as virtual events go, this was our first, so I think pretty good. Let me hand it over to Sasha for some.
May I say one final comment before? Sasha, first of all, I'm thrilled you're out there. I know every one of you is destined for greatness. There's no reason not to aim high. You should, boards are common sense. There's no reason you can't do it. I look at my colleagues. I'm sure every one of you is as smart as my board colleagues. So go for it and don't be timid.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Betsy. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you speak to our members. I took so much away from that conversation. I loved your analogy about a relationship being like a bank account. You've got to put something in order to take something out. I think people forget that a lot of the time. Thank you so much for those resources. I'm sure that everyone on the line is now going to look them up, like Athena Alliance, Him for Her, 30% Coalition. And thank you for explaining board insurance and the legalities around that. So it was very, very insightful. We're very grateful.
It was my pleasure. I enjoyed being with you. And for the resource list, I will send it to Laura.
Okay, awesome. And to all of the members that dialed in today, we will be sending out a thank you email for attending. And Betsy has generously allowed us to include a digital version of her book. So you will also be receiving that. If you are not a member yet of NYC FinTech Women, please become one. We are 5,000 members strong right now. And the silver lining to the pandemic is that we're no longer constrained to New York anymore. We can very much cater nationally and even globally for all the women in FinTech. My co-founder, Michelle Tran, has moved out to San Francisco, so we're definitely building out our presence there. And in terms of upcoming events, in May, we have an event with MoneyLion and Stash about investing in uncertain times. In June, on the 18th, we are hosting an event with Uncork. In July, on the 13th, we're hosting an event with Carter. And if you haven't already seen it, I'd love for you to look at our jobs page. It's really overflowing right now, which is great. We have over 30 different companies advertising and a campaign across LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter that's called #HireHer. Some of the companies that are advertising roles are the likes of Alloy, Betterment, and Ramp, which is a new corporate card startup that I work at. So definitely check that one out. You will soon be receiving the invite for the MoneyLion Stash event. So thanks, everyone.